All right, let's talk about what is, quite possibly, the deadliest infectious disease in all of human history. Seriously, it's been with us for 3 million years. That's before we were even Homo sapiens. We found its DNA in Egyptian mummies, it's mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, it's been a part of our story forever. But here's the twist, the paradox that makes this whole thing so tragic. In a single recent year, tuberculosis killed 1.5 million people. To put that in perspective, that is more than malaria, homicide, and war combined. And the really staggering, almost unbelievable thing about that number, we have a cure. We've had one for over 70 years. So that's the big question we're going to unpack. Why is this ancient killer, a disease we know how to beat, still taking such a massive toll on our modern world? Well, the answer, as you'll see, tells us a whole lot more about us than it does about the bacteria itself. Okay, so to get to the bottom of this, we first have to understand the enemy. And the bacterium behind tuberculosis is, well, it's just plain weird. It doesn't play by the same rules as other diseases, and that uniqueness is its greatest weapon. So, say hello to Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It's what's known as a strict aerobe, which is just a fancy way of saying it needs oxygen to live. And that's exactly why it loves our lungs. But its real superpower is its cell wall. You see, it's incredibly thick, fatty, and waxy. Think of it like a suit of waxy armor. This makes it super tough, so it can survive for months on a dry surface, and, this is the key, it can survive inside the very immune cells that are supposed to destroy it. So, how does an infection actually happen? It all starts when you breathe the bacteria in. It gets past your body's normal defenses and sets up shop deep in your lungs. Right on cue, your immune system's first responders, cells called macrophages, show up and literally eat the invaders. But here's the crazy part. TB produces a special protein that basically shuts down the macrophage's internal garbage disposal. So instead of being destroyed, the bacteria just hangs out, safe and sound, multiplying inside the very cell that was meant to kill it. As a last resort, your body tries to wall it off, building this tiny cheese-like lesion around it called a granuloma. And this right here is the most crucial distinction you have to understand. For most people, somewhere between 90 and 95%, that containment strategy actually works. The bacteria gets walled off, it goes dormant, and it just stays there. We call that latent infection. The person isn't sick, they can't spread it to anyone, and they might go their whole life without even knowing they have it. But for that other 5 to 10%, usually because their immune system gets weakened, the bacteria breaks out. And that's when it becomes active disease. That's when you get sick, and that's when you can spread TB. But you know, tuberculosis isn't just a science story about bacteria and immune cells. It's a deeply, deeply human story. And our relationship with this disease has gone through some of the most bizarre twists you can imagine. For centuries, TB was known as consumption, and it was just drenched in stigma. People thought it was hereditary or a punishment from God for some sin, or even demonic possession. Sufferers were called invalids. I mean, literally, they were seen as invalid people. It was the classic move of blaming the victim, of making up a story to feel safe from something terrifying. But then, in the 19th century, something absolutely wild started to happen, especially in the big cities of Europe and America. The disease was everywhere, from the poorest slums to the wealthiest homes, and the story around it began to change. The stigma started to fade, and it was replaced by a weird, deadly kind of romanticism. And this is where the story gets just totally surreal. The actual symptoms of the disease, the paper-thin skin, the feverish flush on the cheeks, the big, sunken eyes, they became the height of fashion. It was actually called consumptive chic. Women would put poisonous belladonna drops in their eyes to dilate their pupils and squeeze into these bone-crushing corsets to get that super-thin, wasted-away look. The disease was somehow reimagined as a sign of artistic genius or delicate sensitivity, all while people were literally slowly drowning as their lungs filled with fluid. Obviously, that romantic idea couldn't last forever. As we headed into the 20th century, science finally started to gain the upper hand. But this new chapter in the story brought a whole new set of problems. Bacteria that could fight back, the economics of medicine, and a deep human inequity. The first huge breakthrough was in 1882, when a doctor named Robert Koch proved TB was caused by a germ, not by having a weak character. Then, boom, 1943, we get streptomycin, the first antibiotic that could actually kill it. For the first time ever, TB was curable. But then, look at this gap on the timeline. From 1965 to 2012. 47 years with no new drugs. Why?
Well, because as TB numbers dropped in rich countries, the drug companies lost their financial incentive. It became a poor person's disease, and for the most part, the rest of the world just looked away.
And during that long period of neglect, the bacteria did what life always does. It evolved. Bad or incomplete treatments allowed the toughest bugs to survive and multiply. This led to the rise of multi-drug-resistant and extensively drug-resistant TB. These are basically nightmare versions of the disease. They're incredibly hard, incredibly expensive, and incredibly toxic to treat. To really get what this modern fight is like, I want you to meet Fuma Till from South Africa. She was diagnosed with drug-resistant TB when she was just a teenager, and this quote says it all. She's Googling her own illness and just seeing pictures of people who had already died. Imagine how terrifying that must have been. Fuma's story is just, wow. She went through years of awful, painful treatments, one of which actually caused permanent hearing loss, only to find out it was the wrong medicine for her specific strain of TB. But she didn't just survive this. She became an activist. She helped lead a successful lawsuit against a massive drug company to break the patent on a newer, life-saving drug, which ended up slashing the price and making it available to thousands of people who would have just been left to die. And Fuma's story, her incredible fight, it takes us right to the very heart of the matter. It shows us the real reason why tuberculosis is still a global killer today. So here's the bottom line. Today, TB isn't really caused by a bacteria that we can't kill. It's caused by poverty. It's caused by crowded living conditions and malnutrition that weaken people's immune systems. It's caused by a pharmaceutical industry that often puts profits before people, and by health systems that are just too broken to deliver the care that we know works. This quote from a TB doctor named KJ Sun just lays it all out. When someone asked him how many of those 1.5 million people would die each year if they just had access to good health care, his answer was immediate. None. Zero. These deaths are not inevitable. They are a choice. They are a failure of our systems. So we end right back where we started, with that same paradox. It turns out we are the cause, but we are also the cure. We have the science, we have the medicine, we have the resources to end this disease for good. The only thing we're missing is the collective will to do it. And that leaves us with one final, very uncomfortable question. We could choose to live in a world where no one dies of TB. So why don't we?